And now we are getting closer to verdict day. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this WHAS 11 Plus special report. I'm Doug Proffitt. Steve Lawson may not be on trial much longer for his alleged role in the cover-up in the death of Bardstown mother Crystal Rogers. The prosecution rested its case today in his trial, and the defense picks up the case tomorrow morning in Bowling Green just to call 2 more witnesses. WHAS 11 Shay McAllister has been on the trial since it started on Tuesday of this week. And Shay, the other day we could actually call it bombshell day. Today it was that phone call between Lawson and his mother played in the courtroom. Certainly left Crystal's family in tears there. Very emotional.
Absolutely, very emotional. And I'll say very emotional here because yes, Crystal's family visibly upset, using tissues, actually pulling tissues out of their pockets, wiping their eyes. Once we took a break, they actually left the room. You could tell it was hard for them to hear, but let me tell you about the other emotion here. The other emotion was in these phone calls. It was Steve Lawson's mom on the other end of the phone talking to her son who was in jail, saying things like, "Why did you do this? You have to know what happened to this little girl." She goes on to say, well, did Brooks Houck ask you to kill her? Why would you do that? She goes on and he explains, no, I didn't kill her. I didn't want to be a part of it. You know, I helped with something different. Eventually, his mom says, 2 days later, you know that the girl is missing. You should have gone to police. He says, Mom, you're right. And she says, well, Steve, only you know what happened. And it was almost this very intimate look into this conversation between Steve and his mother. It happened just a few weeks after he was first arrested, where she's saying, why did you do this? Why? And you can tell he's defeated in the call. So 2 different sides there, emotions on both sides. But of course, that's just one part of what happened in court today. We also heard one name again and again and again. That name is Nick Houck. I want to bring in my colleague, Isaiah Kim Martinez, senior reporter at WHAS 11, also in the courtroom with me today, hearing Nick Houck mentioned again and again and again, called a co-conspirator, called a suspect. And it's so interesting because still no arrest of Nick Houck.
Sure, and it's something that, like you said, and you're going to talk about this in a bit, there are a lot of people in the community that almost just see this, Nick Houck's potential, alleged involvement, as something that's sort of waiting to happen. They see it as a potential down the road possibility, potential arrest, potential grand jury indictment. These are things that people talk about in the community. We just haven't seen it from a legal perspective come to fruition.
Yeah, and big questions on when or if we ever will. Well, there's one person who certainly had a lot to say about this. We actually had the former Bardstown Police Chief, Rick McCubbin, reached out to me after seeing some of our coverage earlier today. He had some pretty strong words about this whole Nick Houck situation.
Firing his ass was one of the best things I've done as a police chief in 35 years. You know, just knowing, can't put a finger on it, but you get that feeling, and I'm relieved I made the right call.
Relieved I made the right call. And he's been saying that for the last 10 years. It's been almost 10 years on the dot since he fired Nick. He's always stood by his decision, but today, doubling down.
And if you go back, Shay, and you covered this back in 2015, I was not here, but I've seen the coverage. I mean, Nick Houck, it was pretty high profile, right? When he was first asked to be questioned by police days after Crystal Rogers' disappearance, he fought that. And basically, you had Rick McCubbin say, sit down, you're going to cooperate with this interrogation. And he told you today, I always felt something was off, is his verbiage for this. And he believes some of this name dropping is sort of opening that door. He feels sort of like, listen, I made the right call, were his words there.
Yeah, he had a lot to say about it. He also said he wasn't surprised at all to hear that not only is Nick being considered possibly involved here, other family members are too.
I was like, finally, it's, you know, still not charged, I understand, but just to hear the kind of what we've all thought and known, and I think they were a part of, you know, taking her away, helping get rid of her, bury her, whatever they did.
Well, Rick.
Yeah, he's still, just like the rest of us, waiting to find out what that was.
Yeah.
Rick McCubbin, been around a long time, a former Louisville cop, and as you said, was the Bardstown chief when all this happened. He's been sitting on the sidelines. Very interesting that he picked up the phone and gave you a call. Strong statements from him. Does he think charges could be coming against Nick Houck? That's a big question out there. Everybody is wondering if that's the next shoe to drop.
Something Isaiah and I and everyone here has been talking about all
Sure.
week. Every single day we hear Nick's name mentioned. So of course I had to ask the chief. Here's what he had to say.
A lot of people have that question, the same question. When? You've said all these things, make it happen.
So do you think it's just a matter of time now?
I do. I really do.
Just a matter of time. That's what that's what Rick McCubbin thinks for an arrest in this case.
And I wrote this down in your interview. He said, quote, "It's up to the prosecutor when to flip the switch." When is that potentially going to happen? We have another trial, both with Brooks Houck and, of course, Joey Lawson coming up next month. Where does this lead? He used the words, they may already have a plan. He used the words arrest, grand jury indictment. He threw everything out there. Obviously, he's saying he's not sure any of this is going to happen, but he doesn't believe any of this is a coincidence and potentially a long-term strategy here by the prosecution.
Interesting to think that this all could be a small part of a much bigger plan, Doug.
We're going to pick up our conversation on that point. We want to bring in our legal analyst right now, Nick Mudd. He has been following this case with us for over a year. Nick, we've been asking you this question the last few days about Nick Houck as he comes up in this case, as Shake counted 4 times already. We've heard his name. Right. Do you think that he's going to be brought into this case later, maybe even before the June 24th start of his brother's trial?
I would highly doubt he would be brought in right before his brother's trial, just because that could muddy the waters and get a continuance for that case. And I certainly know Shane Young, as the prosecutor, and Judge Sims do not want a continuance at all. I think the way that this trial is proceeding is how quickly it's moving. That being said, we don't know what concrete evidence there is against Nick Houck. You know, people can say, hey, he lied, or he's involved, or we think he's involved, but we don't know what concrete evidence is out there yet that could be used to return a grand jury indictment against him, and that's kind of really what we're waiting on.
As Shane Young, the prosecutor, even clarified today, calling him an unindicted co-conspirator.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about today. Steve Lawson, tomorrow could be the final day of this trial. We've not heard from Steve Lawson. It's his trial. Does he make an appearance on the stand tomorrow? Would that even be a smart move with his history of lying and inconsistencies in his storytelling?
I think it's the million-dollar question of this case. I think the jury wants to hear from him. Certainly in any criminal case, the jury wants to hear from a defendant, but this case specifically, he has been shown to have given multiple stories about what happened the night that Crystal Rogers went disappearing, multiple stories about phone calls, things of that nature. So at this point, you know, with the proof that's been given, his credibility there starts really, you know, way behind the 8 ball.
Would you put him on the stand?
I would.
You would?
And I'll tell you why. At this point, you got nothing to lose, all right? And the question really becomes, you've conceded the tampering. The question becomes, did he know that Brooks Houck was going to murder Crystal Rogers? And did he assist with that? Did he conspire in any way? And I think that a good strategy would be to put him on, own the fact that you were scared, you were, you know, upset, and just you were fearing to go to jail.
Conceded the tampering. Let's bring our viewers up to date on that. Earlier this week, Steve Lawson's own attorney admitted to the tampering charge, saying that, he's guilty of that. So
absolutely.
Easy for the jury. They made that one. Now we have conspiracy to commit murder.
Right.
So what would be the benefit of putting Steve Lawson in front of these people?
I think if you show the jury, like, hey, I work for, you know, I'm Steve Lawson, I work for Brooks Houck, I'm making peanuts for money, I'm not getting paid much, I'm doing what he's saying, he's my only source of income, I didn't have any bone to pick with this woman, I didn't want to kill this woman, I didn't want to participate in this, all I did is move the car later, and I was just an employee, and I was doing what my boss told me to do. Why did you give a bunch of different statements? Well, because I was scared. I didn't want to upset him. I didn't want to get in trouble with police. I didn't want to go to prison, and I didn't know what to do.
You think there's a wild chance he could actually connect with the jury?
Absolutely. I mean, he's a human being just like you and me, okay? And if there's a chance the jury looks at him and they have sympathy and they see that he's been honest and telling the truth that day tomorrow in court, there's a chance they believe him, and maybe they just convict him of a tampering and they walk him out the door in the conspiracy.
Let's talk about the phone call. Lawson calls his mother from jail.
Right.
It's recorded. played in the courtroom today. Mother says things like to Steve, Brooks Houck didn't ask you to kill her, ? He said, I want her gone. I said, what are you talking about? Lawson replied. That kind of conversation, is it circumstantial? Is it very important in this case?
I think he could flip it and say, look, I knew Brooks wanted her gone, but I didn't have anything to do with that. I was telling my mom the truth. You know, now my mom's on me. We're on a recorded line, but a lot of times people still speak freely on those lines, as any probably police officer, corrections officer would testify. People know they're being recorded, but they keep talking. And, you know, in this situation, I think you get on the stand, you own the phone call, you explain it, you say I was scared and I was following orders.
We're going to talk with you in just a second more about how tomorrow could play out, which could be the final day. But we ran a clip from you last night. We found in your interview, you said that yesterday was a key day for the prosecution, that the case really turned yesterday. You've thought more about that. What do you think? I
think they certainly put him involved within the murder. That several people multiple employees testified yesterday that worked for Brooks Houck, and they kind of built their circumstantial case up. However, the question I thought about last night was, is there a smoking gun to directly connect him to conspiring and or committing the murder? And I don't know if that exists.
Okay. Well, we want to go back to Bowling Green and continue our conversation with Shay McAllister. We want to turn to the defense who began their case today. However, there was one last-ditch effort, Shay, to get the case thrown out.
Yeah, Doug, you know, I have to tell you, on day one of this, we're walking through the security detectors down here on the bottom floor of the courthouse, and I was walking in right behind Darren Wolf, that's Steve Lawson's attorney, and I said, Darren, any surprises for us? What are you going to do? And he turned around and he said, well, if I told you, Shay, it wouldn't be a surprise. So I've been waiting to see, you know, what are his moves going to be throughout this. This is one that did surprise me. So right at the end of the prosecution's case, he filed a motion to have a judgment of acquittal on the conspiracy to commit murder. He told the judge, look, we admit tampering with physical evidence was done. He's guilty of that. We admit that. But there's no evidence that he committed this other charge of conspiracy to commit murder. So he asked the judge to acquit him of that charge. Darren Wolf said this, I don't believe evidence shows that a reasonable jury could take the evidence shown and conclude that Mr. Lawson is guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. He goes on to say here that the legal definition of the charge does not reflect the evidence that was shown throughout the prosecution's case. Well, Shane Young comes back and says, well, actually, it fits the definition perfectly, because conspiracy to commit murder is suggesting that there was some plan here, that everybody was in on a plan. And that's exactly what happened. Shane Young, the prosecutor, said this, Mr. Lawson was aware that Houck wanted to kill Crystal Rogers, and he actually asked him to do it. When Mr. Houck inquired about killing Miss Rogers, Steve Lawson said, I'm not going to do that. But then he did take it one step further and had another conversation with another man that he thought would. Doug, here they're building that case. And for those of us sitting in the courtroom, which I should say the jury was not there for this. The jury had been excused on their lunch break. They were not there to hear all of this. But for all of us sitting in the courtroom, it definitely was a moment of, oh, that's how you piece that together. That's what the prosecution's trying to do here. It was very interesting. Ultimately, the judge sided with the prosecution and saying, no, I think that there actually could be a case here. We're going to go ahead and let the jury hear the rest of the case and let them decide.
Great insight and perspective from the courtroom. Thanks, Shay. I asked Nick about that. You know this attorney. Right. Is he well known for just like throwing spaghetti to the wall to see if it'll stick?
So the end of any prosecution's case, you have to make a motion for acquittal. You have to. And every once in a while, I've won one time. It's what we call a Hail Mary play, but you know the rules say you got to throw the Hail Mary and give it one shot, and he did what he was supposed to do. Unfortunately, the question is could a reasonable jury find in the light most favorable to the Commonwealth, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he committed this? and it's a pretty low bar. So,
But Nick, come on. How did this attorney do this with a straight face? He already admitted to the tampering with physical evidence, so you can't possibly get an acquittal if you're already saying he's guilty on one point, right?
Well, as we know, Mr. Wolf got pretty tense today with Shane Young, the prosecutor. He's fighting hard for his client. He's fighting for his client's rights, and his client's fighting for his life. And so, Darren Wolf is doing what he's supposed to do, being a good lawyer and pushing hard.
Remember at the beginning of this trial, they made a big deal of saying Steve Lawson is not charged with murder. But boy, that word has been thrown around a lot. They've tried to connect him to it. We had the one testimony saying from the woman on the stand saying, you knew you committed murder. So is that still floating around the minds of this jury?
It could be, but the prosecution's going to clean that up in the closing argument, as will the defense. Obviously, prosecution say, look, we don't have to prove that much. All we got to prove that there was a plan here and he acted on the plan or helped out or assisted in some way. And certainly, I think the defense strategy is going to be, look, I wasn't involved in this. I came in after the fact. Because if he comes in after the murder of Crystal Rogers, if Stephen Lawson comes in after, the jury's got to walk him out the door on everything except the tampering.
We'll talk about how you think this is going to end in just a minute, but first of all, I want to ask you the most critical key piece of evidence that has come out in this trial so far, this short trial, this fast-moving trial. What would you say it is?
It has been. Certainly, the statements of Stephen Lawson have not helped him with the phone records as well. It's just been lie after lie after lie after lie. And, all of the people stating yesterday, all of the workers, basically pulling him into that involvement with Brooks Houck, putting him with Brooks Houck, talking about committing the murder. I think that yesterday was the big day for the prosecution.
So the key here is to paint Brooks Houck as the entire mastermind, to take the load off of Lawson's shoulders, right?
Right. But I think the defense strategy should be, in closing, to paint Houck as the mastermind and say, absolutely, he's the mastermind. Yes, all we are is, somebody just doing our job and following orders from the boss. We weren't responsible for this. This wasn't our intent. We didn't have any part of hurting this woman. We were just there later.
So if you were to, let's play the game here.
Okay.
If you were just to get a conviction on tampering, what kind of time in jail is that?
1 to 5 years, and the pro eligibility up to the 4 years is 15% time. So if he got, at the time he's got in right now, really even up to a 5-year sentence of 20%, he would be parole eligible immediately.
Okay. And do you still believe this case sets the blueprint for the next case, or are we talking apples and oranges here?
I think we're getting a third of the slice of the pie, and I think we're going to get the rest. I think the next case will go on probably double the amount of time. We'll hear from much more witnesses, and I think it'll be much more involved.
Okay, we'll pick up that point in just a second. And now we want to bring in Isaiah Kim Martinez, also covering this trial for us. Isaiah, let's look ahead to tomorrow. The defense is planning to call, what, just 2 witnesses total, or are there any more?
Doug, at least 2 is what the judge told the jury before they were dismissed early this afternoon. The big question, of course, who do they have left coming up? And you asked the great question of Nick Mudd there, who didn't rule out the possibility of putting Steve Lawson, the criminal defendant here, on the witness stand. Nick brought up the point. What do they have to lose here? I've covered a trial in the past where having the defendant be the last person the jury hears from can actually be very powerful. Potentially, maybe if you can't get acquitted on both charges, maybe one of them. There's really, again, to that point, not a whole lot to lose in this case. I do want to bring up a little bit of an in-the-weeds point, but stay with me here. After the jury was adjourned for the day, there was a motion, sort of a motion made by prosecution, or by the prosecution, basically reminding the judge, hey, you made this order that keeps the defense, or any of these attorneys, from bringing up police interviews between June and November of 2023 involving Steve Lawson. The defense quickly fought back on that. They went up, attorney Darren Wolf said, listen, we've complied with the judge's order. We haven't mentioned any of those interviews. Shane Young came back, the prosecutor, and said, you mentioned those 20 hours of testimony in your opening remarks, opening statements. So you get this sense, I got this sense, that they're sort of sensing what's to come and wanted to get in front of that potentially. It'll be really interesting to see exactly what that means and what kind of witness testimony we'll hear as this case closes, or the trial wraps up here soon. Doug.
Okay, thank you. Going to be a big day tomorrow, Friday. So, Nick, let's lay out the day tomorrow. Going to begin in the morning there in Bowling Green with the defense witnesses. So that could be long, quick.
Hours, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. Obviously, there's no bombshell witnesses from the defense that we're aware of, but there could be one, and that would be the last witness if they choose to call him, and that would be Stephen Lawson.
I'm going to ask you that. If you're going to put Steve Lawson on the trial, and we know if you were his attorney, you would do it. I
think I would.
Even though with his credibility issues, when do you put him on? When is the strategic moment for him to appear before the jury?
Right before the jury goes out. You put him on very last. They've been waiting. They've got everything. Now he can respond to everything as well. There's not going to be something that comes after him. Now, the prosecution could put on what's called rebuttal witnesses after him to undermine his credibility, but at this point, I doubt they would go that route.
Let's talk about the jury real quick. We know this is a jury that knows a lot about this case. The polling showed that. Right. What's running through their mind? It's tomorrow. It's a Friday, parked right before the weekend. They're heading toward lunch.
Right. I think that lunch, certainly the defense will get their closing arguments, prosecution will get their closing arguments. The judge will then instruct them on the law. They go out, they're ordered lunch. I think we get a verdict by 4 o'clock tomorrow.
You know Shane Young.
I do.
What's his closing argument going to say?
Oh, he's going to undermine Lawson's credibility for an hour, okay? And just tear it apart and say he knew he was involved, this is why he was involved, this is how we know he was involved, and this is everything that he lied about. And the big thing Shane is going to say in closing argument, I bet you, is why would he lie and tell all these stories if he wasn't guilty?
Is Shane Young going to bring up Nick Houck, Rosemary Houck, the mother of Brooks Houck? Of course, Brooks Houck is the chief suspect in this, going to be tried starting June 24th.
He's going to pull the jury in and say, look, these people are suspects in this case. They're unindicted co-conspirators, but that's not why we're here. We're here about Stephen Lawson's lies and crimes, et cetera. That's what he's going to argue.
Is the prosecutor going to remind the jury about what the defense has already given them, the tampering with physical evidence charge, saying he's guilty?
He's going to beat it like a dead horse.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's going to be a strong point.
Absolutely. He'd probably get up and say, you know what you do when your back's against the wall? You admit what you can't afford to deny. And that's why they did that.
So the key argument from Shane Young, you can probably hear his voice in your mind. I mean, right. The kind of things he's going to say?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it's going to, I'm telling you, the big point is, why did Steve Lawson lie about thing after thing after thing after thing, whether it's the cell phone records, text messages, calls, times, locations? Why lie about it all if you're not involved?
Let's go to the defense. What's my argument? What's the defense attorney have? What's he going to tell this jury?
We've been honest with you from the beginning. We told you we're guilty of tampering. That's all we did. We're just an employee that worked there. We're just trying to make a buck. We're doing what he says, just like all the other employees that came in. We work for Brooks Houck. We're getting paid, and we're doing what his marching orders are. Why didn't we tell the truth all these times? Because we're scared. We were scared to go to prison. We were scared to get involved, and we didn't want this to happen to us.
Is he going to say things like you can't consider murder in this charge? You can't listen to all these other names and weigh it on Steve Lawson?
Absolutely. I think he's going to, Darren Wolf, if he's the closer, is going to say, there's no proof Steve Lawson murdered Crystal Rogers. And no one has said that.
So if Darren Wolf, Darren Wolf right now, has he made his mind up about putting Lawson on the stand, or is he still going to make a last-minute decision on this?
Doug, I've had a judge look at me and say, Mr. Mudd, are you ready to close? And I have to look at my client, and he says, I want to testify, and there it goes. I mean, literally can be a last-second decision.
It's that split second.
It's always the client's decision. It's never the lawyer's.
So if Lawson testifies, what is Darren Wolf then going to say in his closing arguments? Because he's got a whole new statement and additional information to add to the jury if Lawson's out there. What if Lawson's a disaster on the stand?
Then you own it, and you got to come up with reasons why. I mean, this is where good lawyering comes into play. Darren is a fantastic lawyer. He's handled a lot of big cases, but this is where you got to think on your feet and react. And this is where people say you can prep all you want for trial, but trial happens. And that's where you've got to respond right then and there.
And the prep was a big deal. This attorney tried to stop this right away because he said he wasn't prepared enough. Have you seen any evidence that this attorney was not ready for this case?
You know, I don't know all the discovery, so there could be. The problem is there could be stuff out there. I mean, Darren's a very prepared lawyer. He looks prepared. He's done a great job. But, you know, given the amount of discovery, what if there's something out there that was a smoking gun that he missed because he didn't have enough time? And that's what he just doesn't know because it was so much. 400,000 pages and 200 hours of interviews, that's a lot.
That is a lot. So I've been doing the Nick Mudd checklist here. We're going to bring this back tomorrow to see what happens because tomorrow is going to be a big day and we want to let you know how it's going to play out. Once we get word of that verdict in Bowling Green coming, we're going to be on the air both on Channel 11, WHAS TV, and of course right here as you're watching us on this stream WHAS 11 Plus app. So keep that app handy through the day. You can watch our live breaking news coverage wherever you are from anywhere in Kentucky, and if you're watching us outside the state of Kentucky, and we know many of you are, you can follow this real time as it happens. Remember, folks, this judge banned cameras from the courtroom. So we are doing it old school, Nick. We're doing it the way we used to do it in the 80s before cameras were allowed in the courtroom here in Kentucky, and that is you are in the courtroom with a notepad because he didn't allow phones. Shay's in there taking thorough notes, and she will come out and greet our photographer, and we will get the verdict news right to you. It's really that way we've been handling it.
Archaic.
It's archaic, but it's been happening fast because we all want things coming fast. Right. So don't forget, we will be back in the courtroom again when it resumes at 9 a.m. Bowling Green time. And of course, we'll be here again tomorrow evening, no matter what happens, to break down the verdict for you. For Nick Mudd, I'm Doug Proffitt. Thank you very much for watching.